about percentage, we're talking about a total of 100 and a certain amount out of 100. So below in the follow along with Mr. Pierre, and this is where, as I said, that my goal for trimester 2. Oh yeah, as Mr. Acevedo said, anybody ever go to the 99-cent store? Yeah, that's a great example of percentages, where almost everything that you can purchase there is under $1. Yeah, great example, Mr. Acevedo. But as we see here, as I said to you, one of the goals that I had is to make sure that I am creating or putting up for you these 5 to 10 minute videos. And this 5 to 10 minute video is going to be based off of what we're about to do right now. Okay, so it's going to be super important that you're following along with me. So whatever you see me doing on my slide, you want to be doing the same. Okay, so the grid below is a 10 by 10. So that means there's 10 across and then there's 10 down. And when you add those, or when you multiply that 10 by 10, there's 100 cubes there, or 100 squares. Okay, the shaded portion below represents 34% of the grid. And the first thing that we're asked to do is to write a decimal which represents that shaded portion. Okay, and so what that actually means is that every single one of these, I'm going to change my color to black so that you can see it a little bit better. It means that every single one of these green squares here represents 1%. And because there's a row of 10, then another row of 10, and then another row of 10, and then we have 4 here, this represents 34%, or as a decimal, 0.34. Now, how did Mr. Pierre do that? Well, Mr. Pierre is going to go to his calculator. And in our calculator, if we do 34 divided by 100, this is what we get. Is there someone who has the calculator app that can show us how that's done? Is there someone who can open up their calculator app? Go for it, Allison P. Ah, yeah, that's another example of percentages. Yeah. So over the weekend, we'll first do this and then we'll get to you. Yet, who is this? This is Allison P. Allison, can you please do 34, type 34, divided by 100? And then equals, boom. So 34 divided by 100 is equal to 0.34. So when we look at our example, and I'm going to ask you to go back once more, and I'll share my screen. That's how we got this. We wrote 34 divided by 100 equals 0.34. This same percentage can be written as a fraction. And because the way of Mr. Pierre's mind works, that's what you saw over here, that this 34 over 100 represents the same thing. So out of 100, this bottom number is what we call the denominator. This top is what we call the numerator. And so 34 out of the total, or 100, which is our total, gives us this fraction. Write a ratio that represents the shaded portion. Well, that's what we just did. Any way that we could write it with our words. So 34 to 100. We could also write it as 34 to 100 with this flash, or we could write it as 34 to 100. And so as Mr. Acevedo reminded us, everything that I'm writing, you should be writing as well. So when I look at Justin's board, I can see Justin is there. Yep, thank you, Justin. When I look at Lanaya's board, I can see that, Lanaya, you wanna just catch up with us? When I look at Sean's board, you wanna go to slide number 2. Sean, if you find that it's easier to use the text box, use the text box, that's fine. When I look at Edric's board, Edric, you're gonna wanna catch up with us, go to slide number 2. And then last but not least, Ian, you're gonna wanna catch up with us as well. How does it look on your side, Mr. Acevedo?
Alison, tienes que escribir lo que el señor Pierre está escribiendo en tu Jamboard. Yeah, that's his great work. Alexis, nice job. I like that you use your text box. Allison P, nice job. And then that's about everybody.
Cool. All right. Now the last question says, what is true about the decimal, the fraction, the ratio, and the percent? What is true about all 4 of what we've just seen, these different ways when it comes to the decimal, the fraction, the ratio, and the percent? What is true about all 4 of them? And the question I love to always ask is, why? Why? What do you notice? So what do you notice about this right here, which is our percent? This right here, which is our decimal. This right here, which is our fraction. And then these, which are our ratios. What do you notice about all 4 of those different ways? Yaretsi, could you say that over the mic so that it'll be on the video? Okay, I'll let you finish eating. But is there someone who could just say what Yaretsi just typed in the chat for us while she's eating, while she's finishing her eating? Yaretsi type something. Go ahead for it. Go for it, Allison P.
They're all 34 to 100.
Yeah, they all represent the same thing. That a percent, written as a percent of 34 over 100, can also, no worries, Yaretsi, I didn't know you were eating. It's all good. It can also be written as a decimal. It can also be written as a fraction and as a ratio. And they are all, and here's the key word, let me change the color. They are all equivalent. They are all equivalent. They all mean the same thing. That 34% just represents 34 out of 100. And we've learned what a ratio is. We know that a ratio just means 34 to 100. Where the total is 100 and the 34 is the part. So if there are 34 boxes that are shaded in, could I figure out how many boxes are not shaded in? Yes or no? Can you type in the chat, yes or no? Could I figure out how many boxes are not shaded in? Type either Y or N in the box, in the chat, sorry. So what I had said, Allison P, was we are able to see that there are 34 boxes that are shaded in. So 34 of these 100 boxes are shaded in. What I had stated was, if I know that there are 34 boxes that are shaded in, could I figure out how many boxes are not shaded in? Yes or no? Yaretsi says yes. Allison says yes. What about everyone else? What do y'all think? Edric, what do you think? Sean, what do you think? Alexis, what do you think? Kayleen, what do you think? Lanaya, what do you think? Ian, what do you think? Anthony, what do you think? Sean says yes. So I can see Lanaya's writing on her board. So she may have missed what I had asked. But what about anyone else? We got 3 people who say yes. Is there anyone who says no? If you are thinking no, you'd be wrong in this instance. Would Yadetsi or Allison or Sean like to explain why they said yes? Because you're right, I can. But how? Go for it, Allison.
So you could, because it's 100 with 34, but the 34 is kind of half, so there's not a lot, and you could count them all, because if you take out like fourth of the 100, you could count the third.
So one of the words that you just used, Allison, you were almost there, but you just said take out. And that's exactly right. If I am taking out or subtracting the 34 from the total that was 100, can I figure out what's left? Yeah, we all know how to subtract. And so that's something else to remember, that if I earned 34%, if I take out 34%, what's left? Well, 100 minus 34 would be equal to 66. So I could still figure out, or just like what Allison was saying, like, yeah, I could then just check each of these boxes here if I wanted to. Let me first get this to stop moving. Let's click this. All right, good. Yeah, I could just count each of the boxes that are here. And I would see that there are 66 of them. All right, so let's now take a look at slide number 3. Oh, before I look at question number 1, which is going to be on the next slide, are there any questions here? Let me just quickly take a look at each of your boards. When I look at Ian's board, once again, Ian, you got to catch up with us, sir. You got to stay with us. Edric, when I look at your board, same with you. You got to stay with us, sir. This is day 1 of trimester 2. We don't want to get left behind. When I look at Sean's board, love that Sean is using the text box instead. Also with Lanaya, excellent job, Lanaya. And then when I look at Justin as well, thank you very much. The last thing that we're going to write here is just what we had written before, which is that they are all equivalent. All right. They all mean the same. That they all represent the same amount. All right. So now knowing this and knowing that we can write this ratio or this percentage in a couple different ways, and knowing that each of these different ways, whether it's a fraction, whether it's a ratio, whether it's a decimal, or whether it's a percent, they all mean the same thing. It's just different ways of representing the same thing. We want to keep that in mind as we move forward. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm now going to stop sharing my screen. This will be the video that gets loaded up later to our class webpage, and I can send that link to you, and I will send it to you also in your Google Classroom.